Hi, everybody, and hi to all the folks online. Thanks for joining us. I'm Mike Morrow. I'm the president of the St. John's Center of the RASC, and this is our regular third Wednesday of the month meeting. I'd like to start with an acknowledgement. We acknowledge that the lands on which members of the St. John's Center of the RASC live and pursue our hobby are situated in the traditional territories of diverse Indigenous groups, and we acknowledge with respect the diverse histories and cultures of the Beothuk, Mi'kmaq, Innu, and Inuit of this province. So I have a few announcements before we get to our main event. And the first is that on June 3rd, which is sharing your screen. Excuse me. Technical issue here. Okay, thank you. Share screen 2. Okay, sorry about that, folks. Thank you, Randy. Yeah. But we've only been doing this for...
I'll edit all this out anyway.
Okay. So on June 3rd, there's a an event at the Geo Center, so that's just under 2 weeks, right? It's Our Future, and it's the update of the Our Future in Space exhibit, and there's a whole program for that evening. I think that's a Tuesday evening, and the featured speaker is going to be Susan Redmond. It's free. There's no registration required. It's going to open at 5, and you can have a look at the exhibit. I've mentioned this before. At the very back of the hall in the downstairs, there's the Our Future in Space exhibit, and that's been updated. We were the external partner with the Geo Center for that, and part of it is about our group, and our old telescope is there, the Northcott telescope, and there's a slideshow with some of our slides, and the other half is researchers, including one of the ones we're going to hear from tonight. No, the one we're going to hear from tonight is one of the researchers. That's the right way to put that. They're profiled, their work is profiled in that exhibit, and so the evening's going to go. Doors open at 5. At 7 o'clock. There's going to be a question and answer panel with Ivan Booth, Penny Morell, and Dr. Hilding Neilson, and they're going to talk about their research and their part of the exhibits. And then at 7:45, Dr. Redmond's going to talk. She's from here, but is going to be working. She's changing positions, but I think she's going to be ending up at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory after this talk. And her work is on astronomy with telescopes that hang from balloons. So her title is To the Stratosphere and Beyond, Chasing Cosmic Clues with Balloon-Borne Telescopes. And then if it's nice, there will be moon viewing. That'll actually be the quarter moon, so it'll be perfect phase in the parking lot outside. So members, if it's nice, please bring some telescopes. And so that's one announcement. Our next meeting is the third Wednesday of June, and the speakers, it's going to be a remote talk from Dr. Catherine Niche, and she's working on a project which is going to be, the launch isn't for a couple of years. It's not going to really happen until the mid-2030s. But it's a very ambitious project where they're sending a helicopter to Titan, the moon of Saturn. So there's enough atmosphere there that it can actually, this is a big helicopter. And so I've heard her give a talk on that. She's from Earth Sciences at Western. And so she's going to talk to us in June. Tonight is the last night to vote. For members to vote on the astro imaging contest. The links are available on the front page, the St. John's RASC.ca front page, but there's a link for, that probably isn't going to come up. I don't know where it's going to come up. You can view the entries here and you can vote here. It's pretty straightforward. There are 2 landscape entries, 10 solar and 6 deep sky. But when you voted for each of them, we also want you to type in your choice for the best overall. And it'll go until about midnight tonight. So if you haven't voted already and you're a member, please go ahead and do that. Welcome to the visitors that are here tonight. Our meetings, you don't have to be a member. They're open to the public. You don't have to be a member, but if you do join the RASC, there are some benefits, including access to our RASC NL Talk channel, where there's lots of mentorship and discussion and shared observations. There are some publications. There are free planetarium shows, and sometimes in the summer we have member observing sessions at Butterpot. So it's a supportive community. We're here to help you learn about astronomy. Members should get the weekly bulletin, and anybody that wants can get the monthly bulletin. And if you're a member and you're not getting those, let us know. And I just want to say a few things. We had International Astronomy Day May 3rd, so earlier this month. And so we had an exhibit set up in the lobby of the Geo Center. There's Chris's telescopes. We had solar telescopes outside to show what we would use if it wasn't cloudy, but that's all we used them for. And the new exhibit downstairs was open. So there's the Northcott telescope in its new case, and the slideshow with observations that members have contributed. And at night, there was what would you call a live stream, I guess.
Star Party.
It was the Global Star Party, that's it. And Randy represented us on that and showed some slides, talked about what we were doing. And I don't know if is there a video of that now available? So I don't know where that is, but you could probably find it somewhere.
I'll tack it onto this one.
Okay, Randy will put it onto here. Okay, so with no further ado, then it's my great pleasure to introduce Dr. Hilding Neilson from this department. He's going to talk about current issues of light and satellite pollution in international relations. And many of us know Hilding. I've got a little bio here, but he's tilt it way up.
Look way up.
Yeah. Okay, so Hilding, how long have you been in the department now? 5 years?
I hope not.
Oh.
In a couple of weeks, it'll be 3 years.
Okay, so Hilding's joined the department not too long ago. He's teaching undergraduate, graduate levels. He's a Mi'kmaq. He strives to embrace and integrate Indigenous knowledge. And I think we've had a talk from you before related to that. Thank you very much. And so I'm going to mute myself and pass the HDMI cable over to Hilding.
So it's a great pleasure to talk to you this evening. What I want to talk to you about is thinking about how we're talking about space and satellite and light pollution in this current world context. And this is a summary of attending 3 very different conferences in the last year. And so those conferences, what I should be doing is hiding all my Zoom stuff, shouldn't I?
Maybe if you do that.
This is why I hate Zoom. Hide the Zoom. That should be better. So 3 of these conferences. One was an academic conference called the 2024 Earth Space Symposium on Sustainability, Governance, and Futures. Bet you that sounds very clear and exciting. The second one was United Nations World Space Forum, held in Bonn, this was a diplomatic conference. And the third one was the inaugural Canadian Space Launch Conference hosted in Ottawa just a few weeks ago. So very different cases. The first one being very academic, so all the university people. The second one being a mixture of industry, diplomats, and academia, and the third one being a whole lot of industry. And so just to give you a little heads up of what we're talking about, this is the list of satellites in different orbits. 7,000 satellites in low Earth orbit, another 500 geostationary, 4,500 in undefined orbits, some in decay, some in re-entry. As you may recall, a Russian satellite that was originally going to go to Venus but failed over 20 years ago almost came down on our heads last week. There was a time where it could have actually come down on Newfoundland, but luckily it didn't. And with a total of 13,000. So today we have 13,000 satellites in orbit around the Earth. In the next decade, it could be as much as 130,000. So that's a whole lot of Starlink internet. And that's what the Starlinks look like. 7,600 as of today in various orbits. So you can see, one thing you can take away from this is many of them don't work. They have about a 10% failure rate. So there's a whole lot of commercial issues around this and a lot of protests because this is also in low Earth orbit. So I'm sure I don't have to ask the astronomers how many of you have seen a Starlink satellite.
You're gonna see some when we go through the images later.
And there have been discussions about mitigation. The American Astronomical Society last week gave an update on their efforts to work with Starlink. One of the efforts was to paint the Earth-facing side black. That didn't work because it overheated the systems and created a giant radio signal. So optical astronomy worked better, but then it destroyed radio astronomy. We also have the growing threat of space debris, not just pieces of satellite falling from space or old probes, but just debris hanging around, whether it's bits and pieces of satellites that have been blown up or destroyed, or dead satellites and whatnot. So all around the Earth is basically a belt of garbage. And as we may be well aware, the re-entry satellites is a more common phenomenon. Whether it is a Russian satellite coming down in the Indian Ocean instead of going to Venus, or in the 1980s when another Soviet satellite came down in Northwest Territories and they had to worry about nuclear issues because it had nuclear materials on board. So this is becoming a much more common phenomenon. And in many ways, this has been proposed as a way to get rid of satellites, to have them burn up in the atmospheres. You can imagine what that could entail if you keep burning up satellites in the atmosphere, because you're just dumping metals in the high altitude of the Earth. And I was a kid of the 1980s. I remember the TV show Captain Planet and how we had to protect the ozone layer. It's actually very possible that these satellites will damage ozone. There's new research that's suggesting that is a possibility. So the question that came down on a lot of these is, particularly in the conference, the academic conference, is this all sustainable? In fact, two of the conferences had the theme of sustainability. This, to me, living in Canada, the concept of sustainability is kind of funny. I remember the cod moratorium because sustainable fishing didn't work. We have sustainable forestry that doesn't normally work. Can we have sustainability in space? And this also leads to the questions, how do we govern in space? This may sound funny, but most every part of the world is governed by somebody or other, with the exception, in principle, of international waters and Antarctica. And neither of those are particularly governed very well. If you go around and look at plastic pollution in the ocean, or the fact that Argentina and Chile every once in a while try to claim the Antarctic. Do we have equitable access to space? Most space launches today are Starlink or SpaceX. Second being China and Russia. And then a few from the Europeans, largely out of the French Guiana. So who has access to space? And of course, how do we deal with this issue of debris? So that's some of the discussions that came up with that first conference. I don't want to talk too much about the first conference because it was very academic. When you have philosophers talking about Voltaire in a space conference, you crossed the line. And so some of the takeaways from this conference largely builds up is, what is the growing issue of liability? What happens when there's an incident in space, which is going to happen? Starlink satellites are not very well placed, so you can easily have a collision with another satellite. Or you can have a purposeful collision, such as various anti-satellite tests have been done in the last 20 years by the US, Russia, and China, which have blown up satellites. So who would be responsible for that or liable for that issue, particularly if it's a private company? It's kind of scary. It's like if Purelator driver hits your car, who's responsible? Is it Purelator or the government or the person driving? And right now, with respect to space, it would be none of the above. Who has rights in space? There's a big question if you have rights in space, if you're humans operating in space, do you have right to water? Do you even have a right to oxygen? That's maybe a little science fiction, but that's another question that's going to come. It was also a very good Doctor Who episode, but that's another story. Sorry?
Oh, so there's a television series a few years ago. What was it called?
The Expanse?
The Expanse.
Yeah. In space industry, there are 3 TV shows: Star Trek, The Expanse, and Doctor Who. People will make those stories every time. Then there was a question of what will be the impact for the global south? I hate this phrase global south, but it basically means, countries that do not normally have access to space or their own space industries, will they have equitable access to space? At this point with LEO, low Earth orbit, Starlink is basically claiming everything. Each of those satellites operates essentially as a little flag of annoyance in space. And so do they have access? And of course, then is outer space part of the environment? This is one of the questions that really took the forefront at this conference, because the idea of Earth space is thinking about environmentalism with respect to space. Is space an environment? In that case, do we have to protect it as an environment and treat it as such? So this led to a number of interesting questions. I would say, ignoring the Voltaire and the philosophy, there was a good discussion about the space law. And space law is a funny thing, because it doesn't really exist, but there's way too many space lawyers. Probably like actual law. But in space law, where you're largely governed by one thing, and that is the Outer Space Treaty, which I'm assuming many of you have heard of. It has a lot of stuff there, but it doesn't say a whole lot in the end, particularly when it comes to privatization in space. So one of the issues with liability, for instance, or rights, is that it is very likely that space companies will have to operate under a flag, in the same way shipping does in maritime law. So you can imagine that Elon Musk could go shopping to other countries for who will give him the best deal for a flag of convenience. Or somebody else could do that. These are some of the issues that are being thought of. From there, the second conference was the World Space Forum, organized by the United Nations. This is a regular, every other year, I think, forum that brings together diplomats, policymakers, private organizations, academy, blah, blah, blah. Basically a lot of everybody who's who's who in governmental agencies attends to this. And there were presentations from the CSA, Bhutan, German Space Agency, ESA, United Arab Emirates, Peru, and a few other countries that I can't think of off the top of my head. And for them, the purpose of this conference in December, this past December, was thinking about space for the Sustainable Development Goals. Now, the Sustainable Development Goals is a series of goals that the UN wants to succeed in the next so many years, whether it is eradicating poverty, ending gender inequities, and so on, clean water, more things like that. And along the ways is to think about, this is such a horrible title, Sustainable Space for Sustainability on Earth. So if you can guess what the theme is, maybe sustainable. And this is a lot of the discussion. I keep walking in and off camera, I'm sure. So in that situation, they had some themes. Along with the space for the Sustainable Development Goals, they had a theme of cooperation in space, a theme of cleaning up space debris, and my personal favorite, because this works everywhere, balancing science and industry. And you can imagine the discussion being, as government agencies do, not a whole lot of actual substance and a lot of big talk, which was a fair bit of. And cooperation with space was made very clear that there are going to be issues. For instance, Canada is a member of the Artemis Accords. The Artemis Accords is an agreement in principle signed currently by about 50 countries to operate under the leadership of the United States in exploiting space. They explicitly exclude Russia and China. And China has plans to build a moon base and all the same stuff in space as well. So what happens if we need to have cooperation? Will they just stare at each other through space stations and glare in a new Cold War type of thing in space, or what? And so you can imagine that's a big deal. But what really stood out to me at this conference was the first time I've ever heard people really talk seriously about the Kessler syndrome. This is the idea that there's so much garbage in space that is actually blocking our ability to launch into space. This was proposed in around the early 80s as a possible problem if things get out of hand. And this is now becoming an issue. Largely, this is becoming an issue because we cannot monitor any debris in space that's less than a centimeter in size. So we actually can monitor pretty much everything in space down to that level, but there's a whole bunch of stuff that's even smaller. And the problem with that is they zip around like bullets. You'll hear regular news stories about having to adjust the ISS to avoid some of this debris. And so this is becoming an issue, and there were private companies there with the goal of one being Astroscale, of coming up with ways of mitigating space debris. So it's good that people are thinking about it. The bad part is it's a 5-10 year problem, and probably always will be, like nuclear fusion. And so with that, the solution so far is to start thinking about the ability to add boosters to your satellites to put them into a higher orbit, which is called the graveyard orbit. This is better than the alternative because when the International Space Station, which they tend to bring down in the next few years, they're going to drop that into the middle of the Pacific. So we don't want to do that too often because you will eventually fill in the Marianas Trench, potentially. But going to the higher orbit just kind of pushes the problem off for a little longer as a graveyard orbit. So we need to have some systems for bringing these down. Some technologies include setting satellites in space that are giant magnets, satellites that can attach and bring them down properly and integrating orbits so they have boosters and other things, but nothing of consequence at this point. Further, with the cooperation in space, this comes into the Artemis Accords and going to the moon. And of course, it's very hard to find a nice picture that actually has countries other than the US or China. Good luck trying to find one that says Canada in space, but whatever. We have to start thinking about this issue of cooperation. All countries or in the Artemis Accords, as well as China and Russia, are going to be building and investing in lunar activities. Most of those activities will be in the south pole of the moon for a good reason. It doesn't get too hot and it doesn't get too cold. It's just right. And so this will be a competition. And so you have to start thinking about, well, how do you deal with cooperation when there's incidents? Do you need a safe security zone? So if I build an outpost, do I need to have like a 300-meter width area to void anybody else from doing stuff, and so on? And just to return to the meeting in Utrecht, Martin Elvis was there from the Harvard Smithsonian, and he actually brought a discussion up about building radio telescopes at the South Pole as well. So not only do we want to do lunar mining, lunar playing lunar golf, I don't know. We also want thinking about astronomy from the moon, largely radio astronomy. And so there's going to be competition for those territories. Cooperation will be an issue. So do we have the protocols for rescue and cooperation? As part of the Outer Space Treaty, we do. There is a rescue and liability provisions. But do we have protocols for interference or safety? Do we have boundaries set, stuff like this? Which turns largely because the Outer Space Treaty says no nation can claim. By and large, we do not. The idea of using space or lunar features is largely new as of the Artemis Accords, which, for those of you who have not read the Artemis Accords, they are not legally binding, but they have a weird caveat where they do not violate the Aerospace Treaty because you don't actually claim the moon, you just dig it up and take that with you. It's a little bit like building your own island. Of course, then there's space for the Sustainable Development Goals. Now, many of you have heard about this because this is very popular in various elements of grants and things like that. Things around sustainable cities, reducing inequalities, economic growth, protecting life below water, life on land. There was and is a proposal for an 18th Sustainable Development Goal, that is a Sustainable Development Goal for space, which is a little creepy because all the Sustainable Development Goals are really about protecting humanity. But this is things that are coming up. And the idea thing with how do we use space for all these things, like for life on land, you would do it for monitoring. You know, one of the things that Canada is becoming a leader in is building satellites for monitoring wildfires. This is the RADARSAT constellation. Or for protecting against climate action and things like that. To be honest, I think a lot of this is a little bit fuzzy in the space industry because a lot of them are just looking for ways to get grants. But one thing that really stood out was a representative from Bhutan speaking about their growing space program, how investing in space is changing their small country. So this is an image of Bhutan 1, which is a small nanosat that was launched over a decade ago. And this is would be the third one that's in development now, I think, in concert with a few other countries. And so they're growing in development engineering and aerospace in a way that helps support them. And it was kind of stands in my mind because the representative was very clear how it fits within the Bhutan kind of goals, which Bhutan is sort of famous for the happiness index and things like that. Then, of course, at the UN Space Forum was the issue between science and industry, which largely means the question, is astronomy a space-based activity? This is an important question that's being asked and raised because of Elon Musk and his garbage satellites. Since they interfere with astronomy at various levels, there is a push from various communities, International Dark Skies, International Amateur Astronomers, the RAC is part of this, if I remember correctly, as well as professional astronomy, to have astronomy classified as a space-based activity. In that way, astronomy will be protected, and all these things that go on in space have to think about astronomy as an activity. And thinking about that is kind of important in multiple situations. This also interacts with the concept of, is dark skies a human right? This is because some of my colleagues have worked on this. The darkest skies now are brighter than they were in the past. Space-based pollution is brightening the night sky in general by about a magnitude in the darkest points. So, you know, that's really a bummer. And so are we thinking about, is dark skies a human right? There's a lot of discussion of astrotourism, dark sky preservation, but maybe as a human right or environmental right, these are things to think about. This was discussed at the UN Space Forum, or at least raised. But you know, it was given some discussion. This has become much more of a discussion at the United Nations COPUS, Center for the Peaceful Uses of Outer Space, which is the other UN space conference. And this has been delivered by various people to think about astronomy as a space-based activity, largely with respect to both optical and radio astronomy. Because Starlink, while is a very bright object and invisible, is also a radio nightmare. And so, because they just leak radio waves everywhere, and that interferes with radio telescopes, which we know very well, because if anybody's ever gone to a radio telescope, you probably need to turn off your cell phone, or turn off or unplug your microwave. For anybody who wants to bring that point home, some of you may have heard of something called the periton. This was a phenomenon observed around noon in Australia at the telescopes there. And it was a flash of radio light that was consistent with something called the fast radio burst, but it was only ever observed around noon. Till they realized it was people opening the microwave door before it stopped. So, being radio quiet is an incredibly important thing for things like the Very Large Array, for the square kilometer array that's being built, and so on. And so thinking about these balances, as well as thinking about dark skies as a human right, is becoming an important concept. How am I doing for time?
You're doing fine.
Okay. So the takeaways from the World Space Forum, other than the fact that I've never gone through security before to go to a conference, the national interests are very strong. Countries see space as a way to grow economically, as a way to develop various technologies, and as a way to make money. But part of that, we're stuck in this issue where debris is becoming a mounting issue. Because, people have already made a mess up there. Now, people are pushing for mitigation planning. There are concepts where you have to have a removal plan on new satellites. How much that'll take point is a problem, because that basically increases the cost of a satellite by about 50%. And as respect to actually cleaning up space, there is no technology at this point. Burning up satellites in our atmosphere is going to be increasingly problematic, and will probably be a climate issue in the near future. And so we need to have improved regulation and cooperation between nations. And, you can take your guess whether you think the United Nations is a good place to do this. Now, here's the third one, and the third conference. And one thing you should take away from this is, if you remember Sesame Street, one of these things is not like the others. This is not like the others. So the Canadian Space Launch Conference. What a pretty graphic. This was held only very recently in Ottawa, organized by a company some of you may have heard of called Nord Space. Anybody have heard of it? Their CEO was all over the CBC here and the Evening Telegram, because they're going to build a spaceport in Newfoundland. And so they motivated this conference by the fact that Canada is the only G7 country without a space launch capacity. I don't know how big of a deal that is, but that's true. Further, it was motivated by national security. I don't know how many of you remember RadarSat 2. This is a part of the Canadian monitoring satellites, and currently they have a constellation. This was the second one put up. This was meant to be launched by NASA via agreement, until something happened. The U.S. intelligence decided we don't want them being able to see us, and so NASA canceled the contract, costing basically a couple $100 million, until it got launched later on by, I think it was ESA or Russia. Back when we kind of worked with Russia. So the idea of national security is that if we want to launch with the U.S. intelligence, U.S. regulations get to dictate what we can or cannot launch. Of course, we bought F-35s from them, which they could shut down, but each their own. The other motivation is this idea of the value chain. This is where I kind of roll my eyes, but the idea is in Canada, they've been doing a lot of stuff around various issues, from operating spacecraft to communications infrastructure, through things like Telesat, spacecraft manufacturers through MDA and various components through MDA and other companies, Honeywell and such. And their argument is what's missing in Canada is launch providers, is rocketry. And I think what might be kind of funny to note is there aren't many places, surprisingly, there aren't that many places where you really want to have a large-scale launch facility. Because we're in the Northern Hemisphere, the preference is to launch eastward. So probably not over here, maybe here. Good luck trying to launch westward. You're not going to be able to, nobody's going to let you launch rockets off of Haida or Vancouver Island. So you're kind of limited here. You can do northern launches. They're doing this in both Norway and Sweden, but we have a small problem with northern launches. It's called Russia. So most of this is probably not a good idea. Maybe you could do Churchill from Churchill, and we used to have a rocket facility test site there. So you could do from Churchill to a certain scale, or you could do it from Eastern Canada. And that's where a lot of people are looking, or I should say a lot of people, but that's where the industry is looking. In fact, the first proposed site is in Canso in Cape Breton. This is a company called Maritime Launch, and that was the only information I could find about them, was their name. Otherwise, they don't really seem to exist. And their argument is they can launch nicely to the southeast, which is what you want, and not have to worry about it. And that's probably okay for us, because some of you may remember a few weeks ago, we also had a warning of debris coming from Cape Canaveral because they were launching to the northeast. So we're going to have that kind of fun traffic game from here. Of course, more recently this year, North Space came to Newfoundland and decided they want to try to build space facilities here. In detail at St. Lawrence. So they have two proposed sites just off the edge of St. Lawrence here, Deep Cove and Middlehead Lighthouse. Now, not a big deal because at the conference, North Space brought their rocket with them to the aviation center or aviation museum. So you can guess a rocket probably ain't that big. It's about that tall at the moment. So they're not going into high orbit, but their next generation, their intention that their second generation will be for LEO orbit, and the third generation will be a multi-stage rocket. And so this will become a bigger issue. Now, this conference was mostly industrial and government speakers. And the propaganda was strong. I'm surprised more people didn't walk out with the black turtleneck, pretending to be Steve Jobs. Their key messages are all not unreasonable. You can't rely on international launch partners, which today the U.S. security provisions will probably limit our ability to launch out of the U.S. We do not talk to Russia or China about these things anymore. So we are literally only have the European Space Agency at this time. Is the most freest place. And they argue we need to cut regulation to be more competitive. Like every industry, apparently. The need to be less risk averse to investing. And the need for support from federal and provincial partners. I will say they were very complimentary to industry Newfoundland and Labrador because they let them do what they want, which is a little scary. So my takeaway from that was maple flavored manifest destiny. I thought it was kind of disturbing. I felt like I was being recruited for a cult. But it was a lot to learn there, that the movement is happening for Canadian space launch facilities as well as growing industry in space. Just before that conference, the CSA was visiting St. John's at TechNL and was discussing with companies about what they need and all these different things, in which people from C-Corps didn't shut up. Sorry, that was me being annoying. So think about all these conferences together. And this is kind of my last slide. So there is a clear disconnect, I think, between the academic thought in space and industry, especially with things around regulation and environmental protection, as well as the needs going forward. What's happening in space is a goal to have a an unregulated kind of phenomenon. Whereas I think the academy and various people through humanities, various field, law, social sciences are thinking maybe we should be thinking about things like this, like criminology in space, for instance. There's a strong and growing interest in building ideas around the circular economy. What you put up, you should have to manage through its lifetime and be able to bring down. And thinking about this through international relations to protect and make space more sustainable. There is a growing voice of astronomy and dark sky advocates in forums such as UN COPUS. And strangely enough, one way or another, outer space is coming to Newfoundland. So that should be fun. So thank you. And questions, comments, consternations?
Thank you very much. Further, a few questions. That was a perspective we never hear here. That was very interesting.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. So questions? I've got one of the things you were talking about with the moon. I just finished reading a book called Our Moon. They were talking about this business that on the moon, nobody's supposed to own part of the moon, but there seems to be some sort of understanding that you shouldn't interfere with somebody else's stuff. And when a rocket is landing, and I guess they figured this out, during the Apollo days, the material that's thrown up, because there's no atmosphere and not much gravity, goes a long way and can actually scour. I guess they landed next to one of the surveyor craft, and it just stripped it when, even though they didn't land right next to it, the debris they threw up damaged it quite a bit. And so just by building something, you sort of claim area around it, because basically if people are going to respect that, they can't land within a certain distance of your stuff. So even though people might not be claiming, this is what the book was saying, right? And so, I mean, is that the way things are going to be, or?
That's the way things look like. This relates to the concept of needing a safety kind of region between spots. And that is effectively a land claim on the moon, because if you build something and you need X area that you can't interfere with, then it's yours effectively.
And all the science fiction pictures of a spacecraft landing next to a facility, that's not real.
Especially on the moon, yeah.
Yeah. Other questions?
Americans are talking about a new golden dome thing.
Missile defense, yeah.
They alluded to some space-based possibly weapons. What's that going to do to satellite capacities?
Probably not a whole lot, depending on what they're using. I don't know enough about the Golden Dome to be sure, but it's effectively, what I understand, it's a mix of what Israel has in their Iron Dome and what Reagan proposed in the 1980s. Which is effectively probably going to be legal in space, because even though Outer Space Treaty bans weaponization, the weaponization largely is claimed to refer to nuclear weapons only. So it's very likely that they will be able to do this. Probably will have not a huge effect, because you wouldn't be able to use these at low Earth orbit, because it'd be very easy to interfere with them or take them down.
So, I mean, right now, for any kind of agreement to be meaningful, I mean, the US has to be part of that. And my feeling is that right now they aren't very much into international cooperation. Did that come up, or did they just sort of skirt around that?
Well, granted, the conferences I attended with the US we were participating was before January 6th. So
okay.
They were still kind of there, but you had to be a little wary about what you're talking about. And by and large, I think what the Europeans will do what they want to do in terms of regulation, and the US will join or not in some way. But yeah, there's a big question of what is an international agreement and will the US sign on it? And I think the biggest concern is whether you also probably need China and Russia to sign in on. sign in on them. One of the things about space right now that's very interesting, this is one of the few regimes where the US, China, and Russia still talk. When it comes to space awareness, they still kind of engage. And so the space agencies are still working together at some level. So there's in some respects, space is a little bit of a place of hope in terms of these things more than not. But yeah, the US is the elephant in the room. Yes.
Your last slide, I was just to elaborate on one of the takeaways you had from all, yeah, that last one about, is it circular, something or other, and international relations?
A circular economy. So the idea of the circular economy is what you put up, you control and have ways to bring down from the beginning. So everything gets used in the circular economy. So if you launch, there's a company that will take it, will use it, then there's a company that could reuse it, and then there's a company that could take it down, and therefore it's gone through the full life cycle and not left there to rot or sit there until it falls. So the idea of building a circular economy would be to have.
Sorry, this check.
What's,
This is check.
oh, yeah, I'll check that.
Okay. And so it's about building, same thing we do with environmentalism, it's about trying to build a circular economy with recycling, reusing, and things like that. It's a bit of more hope at the moment than I think anything else, because the technology isn't there for many parts of this. We're very good at putting things up. We're really bad at everything else.
I'm just worrying about the international relations side of that.
So in that situation is about, so for instance, New Zealand now is one of the has some of the largest number of launches in the last few years. And so depending on which country is focused on different things, they can be actors to bring, in terms of the debris mitigation, different launch vehicles and stuff like that. Similarly with the Artemis Corps in the Artemis mission, Canada's contribution is going to be a rover. Not a scientific rover, but basically a lunar dump truck, which I've learned is a whole other set of issues, and things like that. So they have to work together to build these things patchwork, and so altogether, it's not going to be what one country does in the end.
Maybe it'll be a spur for international relations cooperation. We hope that.
Cross whatever you can.
Yeah.
Okay, we have a question on the chat from Mark. Is it believed that a Kessler syndrome event is going to happen and is only a matter of time?
Short answer is yep. By and large, it's becoming inevitable. Like I said, SpaceX will launch probably another few thousand Starlink satellites. The Kepler constellation that Amazon's putting up is starting to get off the ground, and they'll be in the thousands. China has a constellation. Canada is proposed a constellation through Telsat. The Europeans will have OneWeb. There's almost no way we will not have an incident in the next 20 years.
And by incident, you mean where
There's
something runs into something else and then there's a chain reaction?
maybe not a complete chain reaction yet, but there will be a collision.
Any other questions?
So, I noticed you talked about the Earth astronomers and amateurs.
Mhm.
What's the feel for the way to get radio telescopes to work if you got all these satellites? Are they gonna have a certain area that is free, you know?
Yeah, so
Has there been any proposals or stuff all talk?
there's lots of things happening. So the fun thing about the radio is it has about a century worth of regulation organization through the International Transmission Union. And so their whole bandwidths are supposed to be clear for astronomy as well as for other things. And companies like SpaceX have been trying to deal with mitigate these issues for both optical and radio. So probably they will be doing that okay. The regulations are fairly robust in the radio. Largely what we're dealing with is the fact that Elon just wants to throw stuff up without actually knowing what he's throwing up there. So I think that's probably okay. The optical is going to be a little bit harder because we do not have the same kind of bandwidth regulation that we do in radio. And so there are companies that are looking to do things like solar energy gathering in space. So if you're going to do solar energy gathering in space, that means you're basically creating something that's going to be brighter than the brightest star. all the time, most of the day. Or most of the night. And so that's going to be a challenge in those regulations is how to do that. Right now, any mitigation of satellite optical brightness is voluntary.
And if they're doing energy gathering in space, there's gonna be a beam that if your airplane flies through, the wings will fall off.
I doubt it, but you might get a headache.
Okay.
Was there any talk of going back to the original, you said there's one space law,
The outer space
very
treaty.
old though, isn't it? Was there any talk about, revisiting that? Because it seems to me that needs to be looked at, isn't it?
So the outer space treaty was adopted by the UN in 1967. It still holds as the treaty for space. Everything else is sort of done around it. That includes the Moon Agreement in the 1970s, which kind of tried to do the same thing. There was the Columbian Declaration, which was a way of trying to tax geosynchronous satellites, so that companies that are on the equator can actually benefit from them. That was ignored by the rich countries, as well as today there are various amendments. Sort of, really, we're just kind of chipping away at it still. But the biggest issue with international relations of these laws is how are you going to police it? We've done, satellite destruction, and no one was held liable for it. But, and let's be honest, if something happens in space that America's responsible for, who's going to tell Donald?
And the Space Force, after all.
So does Canada. We have a commander for that.
Well, I don't see any other questions, so let's thank Hilding again for that. That was a really interesting talk. As I said, that's not something we would have heard from anybody else, so I really appreciate that. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Okay, so remarkably, we have some observations. Actually quite a few observations, as it turns out. So people actually saw the sun. You remember, everybody remembers the sun. So in April, we had a nice day, and Chris with the Club Coronado got some nice sunspots here. Let's see, and the 21st, let's see this. Oh, okay, I'm gonna have to go to YouTube. Hope this will, I'll have to see where this comes up. So John Peddle actually got a transit of the space station across the sun from Torbay. So I'll see what, okay, it was there, but we'll do it again. Oh, no, go back. Okay. There, okay, how do I slow it down?
Settings, icon on the bottom for the wheel, here, in the wheel, yeah, playback speed. Go down to a quarter, up to a quarter.
Okay, let's do it again. Okay. It's gonna do that, I think. Okay. So this takes a tremendous amount of planning, so. Oh, there goes, oh, came the other way, yeah. So John had to be in exactly the right place for that to happen. So, impressive work there. And I got a transit as well. So this was April 30th. This didn't take as much planning. Oh, sorry. I gotta turn off YouTube now. Okay. But this was that day, and there was a nice prominence down here. And this was active region 4079. And I guess that one was probably 4076. But this was a big sunspot that went across the sun over a few several days, and people got a few shots of that. So this was April 30th. So this is 6 days later, and now 4079's gotten huge. And this was Randy with C Star, and left to right. Okay, so 4082, 4081, and there's that big one, 4079. There it is, blown up. And this is the next day. So the same group of sunspots. This is from Robert with a white light filter. This just a single image. And then May 14th. So what was that? That was a week ago. There were some really nice prominences. And this is 4087. And I guess I actually caught it with a flare there. You can see the bright spot. And this, oh, so that's the 14th and that's the 16th. So there's still some really nice prominences there. Okay, and then Robert did some shots of the moon with different configurations with his Barlow. I guess partly experimental, but did you learn what you wanted to learn with that? Okay, what did you learn?
That I can frame different objects by manipulating the geometry.
You were moving the lens around in the Barlow, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And Randy got Venus during the day and didn't burn everything up, and so that's a shot you don't usually see. But how close was that to the sun?
There.
Yeah, so 20 degrees or something, or 15 degrees.
It was really windy that day too.
And one of the things that was happening earlier in the month was Mars was going past the Beehive cluster, right? That's what's going on here. So this is Mars, and there's the Beehive cluster. That's Mars there, right? Sort of blown out, so you can see the Beehive cluster. And is this the same day, but using a different? This is using a small lens, and this is using your big telescope. And even though Mars is getting pretty far away, you can still see some of the surface features.
The Beehive shot is actually taken with a finder camera on the telescope.
Sorry, oh, this one here, yeah, okay.
Actually calibrate frames and then find for the first time ever. And it's pretty, it looks better on the screen than it does in person, but anyway. Mars is like well more than an astronomical away, well more than Earth sun distance away, so it's quite far away. I think it was only like three and something seconds across.
Okay. Yep, that's pretty good. And John Peddle was in New York, so this isn't our typical scenic shot, but he was next to a famous painting by Van Gogh, Starry Night. And he went to the Hayden Planetarium, which some of you may have heard about, Neil deGrasse Tyson's place. And it's almost exactly like Gary's planetarium. It's just got a couple extra rows, right? And then we have some deep sky objects. So people who are staying up late are starting to see the summer triangle again. And one of the things that you see with that is the Veil Nebula region in Cygnus. So there's the summer triangle, Vega, Deneb, and Altair. And the Veil Nebula, that's a star, 20 solar masses that exploded, a supernova 10 or 20,000 years ago, about 2,100 light years away. And so this is actually a fairly large object in the sky, and different parts of it have different names, East Veil, West Veil. They have more modern names, Filamentary Nebula. Pickering's Triangle is now Fleming's Triangular Wisp after Wilhelmina Fleming, which I've commented before is nice that they did that. And then sort of zooming in on it, again, there's Cygnus. There's lots of interesting stuff around Cygnus, but there's where the Veil Nebula is. And so this is a shot. Jim, I know, Jim, are you on? Is Jim Johnson online?
Yeah.
Yeah. So Jim posted 5 shots a couple or just a day or so ago, and this is one of them. This is with 51 millimeters, so this is a wide field shot, so you can see the which one's east? That's east and that's west. Okay, and that's the triangle. So very, very nice, Jim. Lovely stuff. As always.
That's a 250 millimeter scope, Mike.
Sorry, what's that?
The focal length on that scope is 250 millimeters.
Right, yes. Yep. So that gives you a nice wide field.
Yeah.
And so hang on, I don't have all yours together, Jim, so I may, but the next one I think is yours too. So the North America Nebula, Trump hasn't renamed it yet. It's also close to Cygnus. So there was the Veil Nebula. The North American Nebula is up here, about 2,500 light years away. There's an ionizing star sort of behind the dust that's lighting things up. And so there it is. I guess that's Hudson's Bay. So this was also with the Red Cat 51, so the 250 millimeters. So you don't normally see that much of it. Yeah, actually, I guess we do have all yours together, Jim, because this was all sort of. Oh, sorry. I thought I was. Yeah, I'm sharing. You're not seeing it? Folks online, are you seeing?
Yes, we can see your
Yep.
screen.
Okay. Okay, phew. The one time that I didn't screw up and Randy did, that somebody make a note of that. I would like that included. I would like that included in the recording. Okay. And then, so this is a different part of the sky, still at a higher right ascension. That's why it's at the beginning of the list. So Sagittarius, this is getting fairly low in the sky. And I think you have to be up fairly late for this to work. So there's lots of nebulosity down in here, and there's the Omega Nebula down here, the Swan Nebula, 5,000, 6,000 light years away, and the Eagle Nebula up here, similar kind of distance, and that's famous for the pillars of creation, which we're going to see in a second. So there's the Eagle Nebula, and there's a beautiful shot of the pillars of creation. This is with Jim's big 9.25 inch scope. So you want to say a little bit about this one, Jim, and with a one of the cameras, I guess, was the Air, and the other one is the Pro. So
Yeah, and they actually have they both have the same sensor size. It's a APS-C size sensor. And the focal length on that scope is 1,650-ish millimeters. And that's reduced. That's with a 0.7 reducer.
okay. Yeah, so big difference in your focal lengths, but this is a beautiful shot.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just love that. And then this is going back to the short focal length scope, and so there's the Eagle Nebula. Which one's which? I think the Eagle Nebula is at
Is on
the top, and the Swan Nebula or the Omega Nebula is down at the bottom, and you have to sort of twist yourself around to see the sort of Omega shape in there. But lovely wide field stuff here. And so I think that's it for Jim for now. Was that all of them, or was there another one coming?
No, there should be M13 there too.
Oh, yeah, okay, that's going to be a little bit further down. So next one we have, there's M13 that's coming, M92. So this is around Hercules. So there's Arcturus Boades. This is the tail of the Big Dipper. So that sort of orients you where this is in the sky. and M92 is a globular cluster, 27,000 light years away. There's about 330,000 stars. It's gravitationally bound, and one of the significant things about this globular cluster is that it's early generation stars. They don't have much beyond hydrogen and helium. That's for astronomers. Everything beyond hydrogen and helium is considered a metal. So the early stars start out with not much beyond hydrogen and helium, and then through supernovas and just stellar evolution, the next generations of stars made from the leftovers of the previous generation are increasingly enriched in heavier elements. So there's M92 with the C star, and this was one of the ones I made a note. Randy was out very early in the morning again to get that one, and you can tell because the C star tells you that it's 4:55 a.m. So you were probably trying to look for something else, right? Or were you just couldn't sleep?
Waiting for Venus.
Oh, waiting for Venus. Okay, very good. The very nice shine. The C stars are just, as people are learning how to use them, the things we're seeing from the C stars are just impressive. And then, of course, the great cluster in Hercules. So there's Cygnus, just to orient you. Vega, that's sort of how I always find it. I find Vega and then go over and look for that shape. And there's the great cluster. About 22,000 light years away. Mostly older stars, but there's some what are called blue stragglers, which are the thing about a globular cluster is the stars tend to be the same age, but if stars are colliding, then you can maybe get some new star formation, and those are the stars that aren't the same age as all the rest, and they tend to be hotter and bigger. And so Greg Baggs did a lovely shot of M13, and you can start to see some color in a good shot, which you can see here. There are some stars with distinct color around M13, and Greg's caught some of that.
And that background galaxy too as well.
Yep, and yeah, there it is there. I forget what that was. There was some discussion online about what one that is. And then this is Jim's M13. This is with the big telescope, and you can really see the variation in colors there. Some of them are more red, some are more blue. Yeah. So Jim, this is a lovely shot again. Thank you. And
You could really zoom in on that too.
yeah. Yep. And then now this is also one from Jim. So Antares, there's a complex of interstellar clouds, the Rho-Ophiuchi complex. Light years, that's that should be light years, of course. 460, it's not that far away. There's a star forming region there, so lovely wide field view of that again with the Red Cat 51. So I guess that's Antares down there, the red star, and you can just see the very subtle. Can you see it?
Much better online.
Yeah, much better online. Let me just turn off the one light at the back. Yeah, you can see there's a lot of lovely nebulosity in there and different colors in that, and some dark. There's obviously some dust up there as well. So Jim, did you want to say a little bit about this one?
The only thing I want to say about it is it only gets 16 degrees above the horizon at the meridian. So it's a very difficult object from our skies to capture, I think, anyway.
Yes, I think everybody agrees, and again another beautiful shot. Thank you very much for that one.
I mean, normally I wouldn't even consider imaging anything below 30 degrees. So
Yeah, that's,
Yeah, well, I'm glad you did this one.
first will be sharp, that low in the sky too.
Yep. Okay, and oh, yeah, question, Jim?
Yeah, so it's got no filters, it says with all the red and blue there, it's natural.
Yeah, so Jim, the question is, it says no filters, is all the red and blue natural? So I'll let you answer that.
In that one, yeah, it's just straight up RGB, no filters at all. Now the previous ones you had shown from the Red Cat had the dual narrowband filter, but this one's got no filter.
So the red is probably coming from hydrogen alpha, and the blue is scattering. It's basically the same reason the sky is blue. So it's light from stars behind going through the dust, and you're seeing the blue scattered towards us more than the other colors. I think
See
that's,
scattering from Antares as well. Yes.
yeah,
And it almost reminds me similar to the Iris Nebula.
yeah, and the Pleiades as well, I guess the same reason it's blue. Okay, good question. Thank you very much. Let's see. Okay, and then we have M5. So there's Hercules, there's Arcturus. So the Big Dipper would be up here somewhere. Everybody online saw that. And so M5 is down in here, a globular cluster. And one of the things when I looked that up is that it's got a lot of variable stars. Now, they aren't the Cepheid variables, which Hilding is the local expert on, but there are Lyrae, and it said that they're also used for distance measurements. So I'll,
Secondary standard candles.
yeah. And so it's nice that the nice thing about globular clusters is you know that all the stuff that's in there is about the same distance. So that's very helpful for calibrating these things. So I assume that's what pages. So this one was from Chris, and yeah, you can start to see some variation in colors of the stars in that one. So that's very nice. Better on the screen, I think, than up here. But
Try and get the auto guiding working next time. That's totally unguided. That's just using the telescope's ability to track unsupervised.
well, I'm just too lazy to guide, so I'm happy. Okay, and then we get to the Big Dipper region. So there's lots of galaxies up there. We'll start at this end. There's the M101, so the handle, and then sort of make a triangle with the last two stars in the handle. That's a spiral galaxy about 21 million light years away. The pinwheel, it's bigger, about 70% bigger than the Milky Way across, and lots of bright hydrogen regions, star forming regions. And then down below the handle, if below means anything, is the M51, the Whirlpool galaxy, and it's interacting with another galaxy. So we'll see them sort of pulling on each other. Similar kind of distance away, a little bit further. And it was actually the first galaxy that was identified as spiral, and it has an active galactic nucleus. So the black hole there is doing stuff, and it's got star forming regions as well. So there's Greg Bagg's Pinwheel Galaxy. I think we saw this one at the last meeting, but this was reprocessed, and you can see all the nice star forming regions in here, and some hydrogen, lots of details there. And this is Greg's Whirlpool Galaxy. Nice, sharp. Greg's doing a lot of stuff with his processing with Graxpert and that. So very nice contrast, very nice bright stuff there. Thank you very much for those. And then we have another galaxy. So here's the Big Dipper. There's Arcturus, and over here, and there's Leo. So sort of in the middle of that, near Coma Berenices, which doesn't really have the stars aren't very bright, but M64 is in there. That's the Black Eye Galaxy. It's called that because there's a dark band of dust, and you can see that here. So this is also from Greg using a an 80mm refractor. Yeah, very nice. And then going a little bit further down, we have the Sunflower Galaxy, 29 and a bit million light years away. These are all part of the M51 group of galaxies. You can see there's a few of them here. And M106, about 24 million light years away. And it's about 1.5 times the size of the Milky Way. And it's also been important for calibrating Cepheid variables, apparently. And so this is Jim's Sunflower Galaxy, just beautiful colors in that. This is with the his big telescope. There's a lot of stuff going on in that galaxy. I guess there's dust and there's a lot of spirals in there. Did you want to say anything about this, Jim? Nope. Did you want to say anything about this, Hilding?
I actually forgot about that one.
There's something interesting about that galaxy, just the fact that there's so many spirals and
Trying to understand this. Lockwood spiral. Looks like it's a two filters. Is that two filters out together?
it might be, yeah.
Dark.
Jim, do you have two different filters here, or how do you do this?
No, there's no filters on that either.
No filters, okay. Okay. Yeah. And so what'd you say, flocculent galaxy?
Yeah, it's a Lockwood spiral.
Okay,
So lots of
okay.
lots of dust, obviously, and once upon a time, once it started.
And then I did a few people did M106, so I tried M106, and there's some other galaxies here. I think that was I think that one's 42, 48, and then 42, 31, and 32, but I'm not sure which one is which. And this one is sort of interesting because apparently when you look at it, I think is it in X-ray? It looks like there's two different arms that don't coincide with the two arms you see invisible. Yeah, there's something weird about that one. And Gary did that one as well, M106. And then we get into Markarian's chain. So there's a cluster of galaxies here, I guess it's the Virgo cluster. And so here's Leo, there's Virgo, there's the Big Dipper. Markarian's chain is down here. The Leo triplet would be over here, but we'll get to that in a minute. And this is Markarian's chain. M87 is the galaxy with the big black hole in the middle that they've actually
Red Horizon Telescope.
Thank you. I would have gotten there eventually, but the Event Horizon Telescope did sort of an image of the black hole for that one. But the Markarian's chain is sort of M84, M86. The eyes, those two the eyes or those two the eyes? I think those two are the eyes. Yeah, that's the eyes. And this nice sort of loop here. So you'll see that in a couple of these images. So this one's from Jim Stacy, who's there. And this was with your big lens on a DSLR, I guess, right? And there they are, M87, whatever they are, 80, 84, 86, the eyes, and the other ones. Lovely shot. So 33-minute exposures for that. And Greg did that as well. So there's 84, 86 in the eyes. And they're there. So you use some software to label everything here, right? What was?
That's actually the newest version of Cyril.
Of Cyril does that.
Beta version.
Okay.
1.4 is finally out.
Okay.
And part of the plate solving feature, and that's got an annotation feature as well as new.
Okay. So
I did that right in Cyril.
So I actually put it here so that you could see I wasn't cheating. I can actually look at it. So M84, M86, and 44, 35, and 38, that's the eyes. And all the other ones there. And Greg did this again, so this one was May 5th and 6th, and then May 16th. Oh, question? Yeah, oh, sorry, you're right in the,
When you were just on. It's the big ring from, and then.
Oh, I just had some problems, like, one of the things you do to try to improve your image quality is you take something called flat frames for calibration, and I just messed them up that night, that was the best I could make it.
it's an artifact.
Yeah, it's an error in the.
It's you think it was a reflection in your
I'm not sure.
dew shield or something like that, or?
Flash frames that.
Yeah. But it's some kind of reflection.
Something happened different.
He fixed it here.
Totally different scope of the second.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah, so this is the 80mm and this is the 8-inch. You got pretty much the same field of view. Did you just crop them to be the same? Okay. Yeah, because the 80 you should get a lot more than that. Okay, very good.
You're the only one using mountain cams there.
Yeah, just, I happen to know the guy that designed and manufactures those, Rock Mountain and Ottawa, when I lived up there years ago, and Jim Johnson was good enough to sell me a used one last fall, so.
Okay,
I've got one somewhere to build.
okay, so the next one is from Jim as well. So this is gonna be the Coma cluster. And so we're in the same part of the sky. So there's again Leo, Arcturus, the Big Dipper, and the Coma cluster is right here in Coma Berenices. It's a cluster of galaxies, over 1,000, 321 million light years away. So that's getting out there. They're mostly not spiral, they're elliptical and lenticular. But this one is significant because this is the one that, or I think it was my understanding from reading about stuff is that Fritz Zwicky back in the 30s, this was one of the things where he looked at the clusters and figured that they were moving in a way that couldn't be accounted for by the amount of stuff that you could see. And he talked about dark matter, and that was, I guess, when the term was introduced. And now, people sort of identify it from motions within galaxies, but he was actually using it to talk about motions within a galaxy cluster. And not too far away is the Needle galaxy. It's a spiral galaxy, but it's edge on, which is why it looks like a needle. And it's apparently more luminous than the Andromeda galaxy. So, and there's Markarian's chain down there. So I'll wait for Jim to identify each of the galaxies on here. A lot of this,
Senior moment.
all of these dots, most of these dots here, the ones that look a little bit reddish, I think are galaxies, right?
Some of them, yeah, that's for sure.
I mean, those are stars there.
Galaxies, like most of them.
Yeah, so,
All the fuzzy gold stuff in the middle.
yeah, amazing.
Fairly well, isn't it?
Yeah,
Oh, yeah, I had about, quarter.
there it is there, yeah. So,
Tracks going through that.
so that, I promised you some Starlinks. And here's Greg's Needle galaxy. And again, there's the Needle galaxy. That must have been the same night.
Yeah, same.
Yeah. And then M104 is it's a peculiar galaxy, which just means that it's not clear what it is. It's got the central bulge seems quite large, and there's a dust lane right around the outer edge, which is what gives it that name. That's sort of a favorite. And this is from Greg as well with the 80mm refractor. And then,
One word.
yes, okay, Greg, Go ahead.
It's just one word. There's an incredible recent Hubble telescope image of the sombrero. You can look up online. The blows my away.
Okay, so for people online, what Greg's saying is there is a recent Hubble image released of the of this galaxy that's quite impressive. Okay, and then the Leo triplet, 65 M6566 and NGC 3628. So they are all about the same distance away. The NGC 3628 is the Hamburger galaxy. And that's what we see from Jim Johnson. Again, another lovely shot. And again, you can see the dust band around the edge. And you can see that he is using a new kind of guiding here. He's got a very well-trained squirrel to guide the telescope. So Jim, do you still have your squirrel?
No, I wasn't able to locate him when I was home this time.
Okay.
That's hopefully the way it stays.
Okay. And he didn't do too much damage, did he? Or
No,
she?
none. She did not.
Probably she, yeah, because she was making a nest.
Yeah.
And Gary did the a couple tries at the Leo triplet. So this was these are both with the C star. So this one was the most recent one. Very
That was done in Salmonier, and that was done in the backyard. The one on the left was done in my backyard, and it's 2 minutes. And the
okay.
one-
Oh, so that's the difference, how dark it is.
Yeah,
Yeah, that boy, that makes a big difference, doesn't it? And Greg had a try at the Leo and sent a screenshot, so I stuck that in anyways.
That's just Mellencam I have has its own software you can download. It only works with those branded cameras, but it's for live viewing. So I'm just trying to learn a little bit of live E88 viewing.
Yep. So, well, maybe we'll see it at one of the outreach events.
I'm hoping one day that I might be able to pull that off. Yeah.
Okay, very good. And one of the challenge was the Regulus dwarf galaxy Leo 1, and Chris took that up. It's a satellite of the Milky Way galaxy. It's closer than the Andromeda galaxy, 820,000. Andromeda is 2.5 million light years away. This is 820,000 light years away. It's not that many stars, 20 million solar masses, very old stars. And on this, just because it's on the same shot here, the Beehive cluster's over here. It's an open cluster in Cancer, about 1,000 stars and all. You'll see that. But first, Chris's Leo galaxy. So you got to look closely. It's a Leo, Leo galaxy. So that's it there. That's very impressive to see that at all, and a satellite. Yep, and Chris had another try at that. So that was April, and this was May. And I guess here you were just sort of showing this. You can, so this is just from Stellarium, but that's highlighting the region that's in this picture, and that so you can see that. Yeah. So
And again, it was more telescope not guiding, not auto guidance. So that's a problem I need to get fixed.
yep. But it's still impressive. You could see anything there. That's pretty good. And I did a shot of the Beehive cluster just for fun. And then the galaxies on this side of the Big Dipper, M81 and M82. I tried the Cigar Galaxy M82 and got a little bit of the hydrogen alpha in the middle, so I was happy with that. And then Greg did the two of them. So there's M82 with the hydrogen alpha in the middle and M81 spiral galaxies. And that's that. So Robert, did you want to do the sky this month? No, okay. So the sky this month will be posted You can find that on our website. I'll just show you what it looks like.
In 24 hours, so.
Okay, so-
You're lucky to get that.
Okay, so Robert's got a picture of the sun. The significant information here is that night isn't as long as it has been. It's getting shorter and shorter. Some information about the planets. Venus is morning and Mars and Jupiter are evening, and Jupiter's just about gone. And not much to do with comets there.
Not sharing that screen.
Really? Okay. How about that? Okay. So there was the sun. Sorry about that. And so you can go online and find this, and our next meteor shower, and we're past the 8 Aquarids, so I guess we're looking at the Delta Aquarids in July. So we're a while. We'll actually have nice weather the next time there's a meteor shower. Okay, so I'm gonna stop sharing that, and I'll go back to sharing.
Make one comment. One of the things I think, Robert, you put in that is the Rochester Luther supernova.
Okay.
And no, nothing has shown up yet that's bright. Nothing has shown up that's bright, like brighter than 12 magnitude in a long, long time.
No.
Statistically, something should happen any time. So.
Yeah.
Okay, good luck with statistics. Okay, am I sharing this one again for the last slide? So I'll finish up, just reminders. The astro imaging contest, the voting deadline is tonight at midnight. But I probably won't shut it off until I wake up in the morning. So if you wake up before me, you might sneak it in, but good luck, because I don't sleep very well. So I would say if you want to do it before midnight. I told you about the June 3rd event at the Geo Center with MUN researchers like Hilding and Susan Redmond's talk. And our next meeting is a month from now with Dr. Nish from Western about the helicopter on Titan. Yes, Randy.
Is there admission to the Geo Center?
No, it's going to be free that night.
Yeah.
Thanks for mentioning that. Okay, so that's it. Thanks everybody online for coming. Thanks everybody here. And for the people in the room, we have refreshments. And thanks to Randy for that. Thanks everybody. Okay, and folks online, I'm going to stop sharing pretty soon. So have a good night. Thanks for joining us.